Hi. Well, I didn't squeeze it all into the first video, so I thought let's go ahead and make part two. After all, it's better to have a little bit of extra than not have enough. So we were talking about the structure of the Canterbury Tales. The the model is, as I mentioned, Boccaccio's Decameron. The thing in the Decameron is that you have 10 characters telling 10 stories. In each of them basically is a noble person, and really the stories aren't connected to who they are individually. All right, they could be interchanged, in fact. So these 10 characters are hiding out there, as we would know now from COVID, quarantining during the plague. Right, they're quarantining and they have no Wi-Fi, they have no cable TV, so they got to tell each other stories to pass the time. Well, as I mentioned in the first part of this video, we have a different situation in Chaucer. We have, first of all, one, the pilgrimage. Right? As I said, they're going to see the tomb of St. Thomas of Becket. They are going in April, venerapo de shore suta, right? The April showers. Because, of course, there's no travel during winter, the time, the conditions are not very good. Right? So all the travel is going to happen after winter is over. Also, we have about 30 travelers who essentially are from all walks of life in England at the time. Okay. And again, as the editors mentioned, and I said in part one, it's pretty unlikely in real life that all these people would have traveled together. But it's not unlikely to see groups of people traveling together, period, because it would be more secure, right? There were no police or highway patrol to be going back and forth, and so to protect themselves from bandits, etc., right, they will travel together. Now, there's two other things I want to mention here. First of all, the host, right? Basically, everybody meets in an inn, right? They're all at the inn at the beginning of their travel. And the host is basically the owner of the inn. And please note that he sets up this situation as kind of a challenge. And he agrees that he will go with them at his own expense, as if anybody wanted him to, wanted to pay for him anyway. And that each of them would tell two stories on the way there and on the way back, which, simple math, is 120. Now, of course, given the nature of what Chaucer was trying to do, different from what Boccaccio was trying to do, where he fits the stories to the character. And the stories, while not necessarily 100% original, are still very, they have to be well chosen to fit each of the different characters. This was a monumental task, and of course, he did not live to finish. In fact, we don't even have one per traveler. Also, he makes it more complicated. Chaucer makes it a little bit more complicated because at one point, some characters join the group and other characters leave the group. Right? So if Chaucer had, in fact, lived long enough, which probably would have taken a couple hundred years, to write all the stories that he had envisioned, it would have been quite something. But even with what he had done, it is, of course, considered one of the masterpieces of English poetry. Now, the idea of the pilgrimage is important, as I said, because it's travel, right? And it sets a certain kind of tone. Everybody has the same purpose, right? Going to the tomb of St. Thomas of Becket, right? To basically give thanks for keeping them alive during this time. Right, they had all had illnesses of one sort or another. Last thing I want to say, and this kind of connects to your discussion thread, the personal I, there is a character who is telling us all about what's going on. This is the narrator, okay? And one of the things that Chaucer does with the narrator is he makes the narrator a little bit, well, I guess the best word would be naive. And one of the things that is fun, especially in the general prologue, to do is to look at the characters that the narrator is describing, see what the narrator says about those characters, but then also see how he responds to the characters compared to how we might respond to the characters. In other words, Chaucer, the poet, is creating a bit of a fictional distance, right? Where the narrator maybe admires certain people we may not so admire, right? As a side note, I don't believe this is in the general prologue, but later in the course of the narration, we do discover that the narrator, the name of the narrator is Chaucer. But that's not to be confused with the actual Chaucer, the real-life Chaucer. And indeed, the narrator has an opportunity to tell a story. And he is so bad, his poetry is so bad, his storytelling is so bad, that the host actually interrupts him and says, we got to get somebody else to talk. So there's kind of a little bit of fun there, too. So for us, this week, we want to focus on the general prologue. Read the prologue, as I said, try to read it with the Middle English, which is actually pretty doable if you give it the attention it needs. The pronunciation is actually more distancing than just reading it. If you're just reading it in front of you, you can figure most of the words out. The words that you can't figure out are noted by the editors in glossary and footnotes, okay, so that you can read along fairly well. Pay attention to each of the different characters. Remember, there's all kinds of different social classes. There's church, there's secular people, there's the noble knight, and then there's some of the lowest workers. While we don't, I believe, have any true peasants, we do have, basically tradespeople who are on the trip. And so they kind of represent some of the lower classes. This ultimately, right, Chaucer is writing what is being called estates satire, meaning he is poking fun at the different estates, or the different parts, if you will, of the society that he lives in. So everybody has got, shall we say, a little something going on, maybe a little hypocrisy, maybe a little corruption, maybe they're just a little too snooty for the room for no purpose whatsoever. They put on airs, right? They, speak French when they don't really know French, or they don't know good French. All kinds of things happening, right? People care about what they look like, or people don't care what they look like. People are very lecherous. People are violent. Some people are cheats and thieves. And some people seem genuinely honest. Who are the best people? Who are the best people, right? The parson and his brother, who is the farmer, who seem in some ways the poorest and lowest on the scale, and not by accident, also strike us ultimately, I think, as some of the most virtuous characters in the group. Right? So it's all going on there. So I hope you like the general prologue.